Welcome to the Principles of Performance podcast, where we discuss how to optimize your health, fitness, and performance. Drawing on decades of experience of working as coaches, consultants, and trainers to top performers, athletes, and teens from professional sports to top universities to the U.S. military, Eric DeGatti and Mike Perry discuss topics and strategies of how to perform at your highest level and be your very best. Join us and our friends and colleagues who are leaders in the fitness and performance industry as we investigate and challenge the most popular training, nutrition, lifestyle, and recovery protocols. Away we go. Here we are back with the Principles of Performance podcast, episode number 22. My name is Eric DeGatti, your host, along with my friend Mike Perry. Mike, how are you today?
Living the dream, buddy. It's a beautiful day here in sunny Boston, so we'll take it.
Yeah, it is. I'm in Boston too, and I concur. It's a nice sunny day, which is we take them as we get them.
I was actually not to kind of get sidetracked before we even start, but I was thinking about putting out a post, and because I thought about like what a concentration of incredible people in our field we have that come from just two areas, like the New York, New Jersey area and Boston, right? It's crazy how many great people we've had coming out of these two areas. It must be something in the water.
Yeah,
the best pizza and the best trainers.
We're due for like a West Side Story type of like fight. It's like Boston versus New York, and there's only a few people are going to get that reference, so I should probably.
Or we go West Coast, East Coast, and we just see what we got there. But anyway, I want to introduce our guest here for today and continue our streak of good luck with great guests. We have Tony Gentilcore, and Tony is one of the co-founders of Cressey Sports Performance, which I'm sure a lot of people have heard about and we'll talk about. And even though he's no longer coaching there, his legacy remains. But he's training people now at his studio Core, which is in Boston. But he's a frequent contributor to media publications like T Nation, bodybuilding.com, Men's Health, Stack Magazine, LiveStrong, and more. He does in-person and online training programs, plus has a number of educational programs for coaches and trainers, and travels all over the world teaching workshops. And we're really excited to have him on here. Welcome, Tony.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the nice introduction.
Absolutely. So I'm going to kick off the questions, and kind of from what little bit I've been able to gather from the work that I've followed of yours for many years. The one thing that I kind of take away is that a lot of our industry takes themselves very seriously, almost way too seriously. But in contrast, you have a way of kind of injecting humor and personality into your content. And, of the things I've learned from you, I've stolen, some great T-spine drills and some other stuff. I've also gathered that you're really good in that you understand and appreciate that Wu-Tang is for the children.
Oh, exactly. Funny, before we go on, one of the highlights of my year is the first day of my kid's kindergarten class. Like first day of kindergarten, I was walking him to school. He had his Wu-Tang is for the children t-shirt on, which, first day of kindergarten, that's already a win in my book. I take him to the front door to meet his teacher, and I was like, oh, here's Julian. And his teacher's name is Mrs. Shea. First thing out of her mouth to me was Wu-Tang's for the children. And I was like, okay, Mrs. Shea is cool. Like it was one of the highlights of my year. It was great.
There you go. There's hope in our educational system. And for those of you who have no idea what we're talking about, the Wu-Tang Clan, it was Dirty Old Bastard, I believe, was one of the rappers, right?
Well,
he went up at an award show, and was it Taylor Swift or somebody like that was getting an award?
Oh man, I don't know. I have no recollection, but
I think it was somebody of that ilk, like it was a Britney Spears type, Taylor Swift type of thing.
Tiffany Swift.
Yeah, I'm just gonna mix them together. But he just basically stepped right in front of her while she was getting her award and screamed that Wu-Tang is for the children. It's forever been embedded in my brain. It's something like that. But so let me ask you this, Tony: are you trying to say that training should actually be fun?
Yes, kinda. I think with regards to my content, thank you. I feel like my writing style and my presenting style is pretty unique. They're one and the same. I like to come across like how I write is how I am in person. I try to keep it authentic. And early in my writing career, I received a great piece of advice from TC Luoma, who's one of the lead editors at T Nation. And when I submitted a few of my first articles, everyone goes through the process, like their first few are always denied. It's like, oh man, I'm never going to get in. And then eventually I got in. And as I got maybe 2 or 3 articles deep on that site, and we're talking, I think 2006, somewhere in 2005. So it was a while ago. He told me, he's like, listen, people want to learn. That's why they come to this site. Like, they want to learn how to improve their squat. They want to learn why their knees hurt, etc. They want to add muscle, but they want to be entertained. So that sentence to me really opened up Pandora's box, in the sense of, when we're talking about deadlift technique, and we're talking about fat loss programs, and we're talking about how to improve scapular or upward rotation, they're very boring topics for the most part. So if I can keep them entertaining and keep people reading so they actually do learn, to me, that's a win. And with regards to training, yes, I think there's a degree of it being fun, but I'm more concerned with having there be intent and purpose with their training. I'm not necessarily there to entertain people per se during an actual training session. My job is to give them a training effect and to help them retain their goals. But that's not to say I don't have a little fun there either. Whereas at the end of a session, if we have 5 to 10 minutes to spare, I might say, hey, okay, let's do an arm farm circuit. Let's do a glute circuit. Let's do something that you want to do that's fun, quote unquote fun. And then, they're going to leave, feeling like they got a pretty good session in. So the short answer is yes. I think you're 100% spot on that this industry takes themselves way too seriously at times. And, I think if I can write an article on program design, but then throw in some self-deprecating humor, or throw in some pop cultural references with movies and stuff I'm watching, I think that's going to keep people's attention. Because I think you guys would agree, today's attention span is like 3 seconds. And if you can't draw people in right away, whether it is writing or digital content, you're missing out on a large portion of that audience.
So, Mike, before you jump in, I want to kind of run with something that you said there, is because there's that balance. And our course is talking about program design, is there's that balance between, okay, there are the principles we need to follow and the elements we need to attack in our checklist of things we need to do to get you to your goal. And sometimes that gets lost. And I'll steal a phrase from one of our mentors, Gray Cook, talks about just exercise entertainment, right? That we're just writing programs that it just for, hey, well, our client's going to get bored. And you say, well, are they really, or are you bored? Right.
Yeah. I think that's, I mean, of course, Gray Cook he never is short of very smart things to say. And I think a lot of the times we do get in our own heads as coaches. I mean, I can look at my computer right now and probably see there's probably thousands of programs that I've written. And we do get in our heads at times where it's like, if I have a client I've been working with for multiple years, at some point I'm going to be like, what the hell am I going to do with this person? And I was like, okay, I got to come up with something fancy and new and unique. And really, I've found time and time again, I just got an email from a client this morning who was like, he likes to write these monthly reviews of the current block of programming to me, which is good feedback for me, like what do you like, what do you dislike, what he feels working. And his number one sentence was like, I really appreciated the simplicity of this past workout. And I remember when I wrote it, I was like, oh man, he's going to hate this. And actually he loved it, just the simplicity of it. And I know personally, I have a coach who writes my programs, and I love the simplicity of it. And I think if we just keep that in the back of our heads when we're writing all these programs for our clients, I think we'd be doing a pretty good job and pretty good service for everyone.
No, absolutely. I think it's definitely a balance of, especially when you're writing programs. I've been doing this for 20 years. I mean, Eric's been doing it for like 75 years. Tony, how long have you been in the industry for?
About the same amount of time as you.
Yeah, about 20 years.
I'm actually right at the 20-year mark this year, actually.
Yeah, and it's hard because I think a lot of the times you're right, especially if you write a lot of programs, you do think, wow, this is getting boring, because I mean, I program for like 45 people a month right now, and I'm like, oh my gosh,
Yeah,
are they going to not like this, or are they going to hate what we're doing? But at the same time, if we're getting results at the end of the day, that's what really matters. But we're kind of, change directions a little bit here. So, if you've been a strength coach in the Boston area, you know about Cressey Performance. You've heard the name of Tony Gentilcore, and you were one of the OGs along with Pete and Eric. And I've even heard the joke that it should have been called Cressey Sports Performance. The stuff that you guys did early on was, in my opinion, was some of the best information out there, because I would argue that the stuff that you guys were putting out early on, along with the stuff that Mike Boyle was putting on, you guys really sort of put Boston on the map when it came to creating this sort of mecca of strength and conditioning. But Eric's done his thing, he's moved on, you've moved on, but did you ever imagine it would be as successful as it did? And what do you think were the key ingredients to make things so successful?
So I think, this is a loaded question, a good loaded question. When Eric and I and Pete started Cressey Sports Performance, that was in 2007. Eric and I were roommates for 2 years leading up to that. He was working in, we were both in Connecticut working at the same gym, and then we moved to Boston. A friend of ours had opened up a facility in the Boston area that Eric went to, and I ended up going to Sports Club LA, which is now Equinox, in downtown Boston. So we were both working in separate facilities while living in Boston. And when we opened up Cressey Sports Performance, I think we were both fairly young. Like I'm 5 years older than both Pete and Eric. So when we opened up Cressey Sports Performance, I was 30 and they were 25. Which, nowadays, that's kind of unheard of for people, quote unquote, that young opening up a facility. And, there was a degree of naivete, I suppose. So we write for T Nation. We're going to do good. We're going to make this happen. People are going to come to us. But that did kind of help us, because when we did open, Eric had already probably a roster of 20, 30 athletes training at that facility that went with him to our facility. And I had a few clients already that were just follow me there. So there was a degree of career capital that we had in our back pocket, having our current client roster, because we weren't starting from zero. So that definitely boded in our favor. And I do think Eric and I both started writing for T Nation early in our careers, and that was with an era where we weren't competing with social media and we weren't competing with YouTube. So T Nation and bodybuilding.com and our respective websites and blogs were kind of the preeminent sources of information for a lot of coaches and personal trainers. So again, I think that was just dumb luck that happened. And I think as our facility grew, and then certainly, we developed the niche of working with baseball players, starting with a lot of local high school baseball players, was kind of evolved in the collegiate level, which then evolved into some minor league guys. And then now Cressey Sports Performance is kind of the preeminent baseball training facility in the country. I don't think any of us thought it would get to that level, but I think we were pretty confident that we were going to do pretty well in terms of staying open for a year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. I hope that answers the question. It's not a sexy answer. I just think there was a lot of, I don't think any of us would say definitively, yeah, we knew this was going to work. I mean, there's certainly a lot of luck, but anyone who knows Eric and Pete, their work ethic is kind of unparalleled. Eric is a terminator of work ethic. I mean, that guy, I've never seen anyone who works harder than him. And I used to joke that he'd be, when we were roommates, he'd be in his room writing articles and books, and I'd be in the living room watching Lord of the Rings for the 17th time. And but that work ethic kind of rubbed off on me. I started doing writing and started being more consistent with it. I know it's a bit off track, but I do think the skill of writing and be able to communicate in that medium is a very powerful tool for any coach and trainer or physical therapist or nutritionist to have. I think if you have the power of being able to communicate via social media or blog posts or whatever, I think that's a very powerful tool. I know it's kind of not in popularity right now, because a lot of what's being pushed nowadays is video content, which not my strong suit, admittedly. But I think a lot of those components of between, already having 5 years in the industry, we were both writing, we were kind of early in on the whole social media diaspora, kind of just worked in our favor at that time.
Yeah, you know what? It's interesting because what I think about when I think about Cressey Sports and the stuff that you guys did early on together, I think about, one, you were one of the first, which always helps, and you were good, right? So you kind of have a perfect storm to hopefully be successful, right? Because you can be first and you can suck. Right. Like, I mean,
True.
If we're being brutally honest, like you could be one of the first people and you could be really, really bad at your job. And it is what it is.
That's a very fair point. Yeah. I'm not a self-promoter at all. I certainly like to think I stay pretty humble, but yeah, like certainly there was a degree of, I wouldn't say pompous, but we knew we were good at being coaches, and we coached people up very well. And lo and behold, if you get people results, that's like the best marketing you can have. Cressey Sports Performance, I think, still has never really spent a dime on marketing. It's all been word of mouth. It's all been, showcasing people's results on social media, etc. That we've never, and even when I've gone off on my own, and I'm working here in Boston on my personal training studio, I don't market my services on Instagram or Facebook. It's all word of mouth, getting my clients results, treating them well, and just being a good coach. It's like the most unsexy answer there is, but there's also, I mean, you said it too, Mike. Like, we've both been coaching for 2 decades. I mean, there's a lot to be said there. I mean, there's a lot of expertise there. All the programs we've written, there's a lot of programs that I write for person A that's very similar to person B, but where the individualization comes in is how I coach those people up on those movements. How I coach somebody up on a deadlift can be completely different from person B on how I coach them up on their deadlift. I mean, the sets and reps might be the same, but the loading's different, the setup is different, how I coach them up is different. And that just comes to being a coach for years and years and years. And that's where expertise. So, yeah.
No.
I'm sorry. 2 things I would add is I got the opportunity to go up and be at the Massachusetts facility for a couple of days for the pitching internship that Eric does. And, the content was awesome, between him and Eric and all the content of the actual, nuts and bolts of strength and conditioning and rehab and all that stuff was awesome. But also what was one of the most powerful things was the hour I spent with Pete at lunch, and what he talked about in terms of culture and really kind of taking things away of, stealing from what Howard Schultz says at Starbucks is we want this to be a third space where people come and hang out. And he said, we know we're doing the right thing when guys are eating 2 meals here. Right. And it's this clubhouse type of effect. And I think places like Cressey, places like yours, places like Mike's Skill of Strength, those are the places that have, as much as our industry got decimated by COVID, those are the places that have really thrived because people are craving that type of community and connection.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, this idea of relatedness, I'm a big fan of talking about self-determination theory with coaches and how, what can we do to improve people's motivation to not only like get over the hump of like going to the gym, but also sticking with it and staying with a plan, this idea of autonomy, competency, et cetera. But the third one is relatedness, and that is community and culture. And certainly, yes, Pete is very, very good at that. There's a reason why he and Mark Fisher and Michael Keeler of Mark Fisher Fitness Business for Unicorns have partnered up. I mean, if that is a very I wouldn't even say it's undervalued, but underappreciated or underutilized component of gym culture is it isn't just getting people results. I mean, that certainly is a big component. But that idea of camaraderie, being around like-minded individuals, and it isn't only gym stuff. I mean, I say this with a bit of tongue in cheek, but I mean, I've presented at facilities around the world where they have book clubs, they have movie clubs, they have nights out with their staff. They you know, they do special events with clients and athletes that are outside of the gym. I mean, all those play into this idea of culture, which is a very important component of everything.
And then the other thing in terms of the experience, that Mike and I, when we open up the course, we actually sit down with the people and explain to them, look, before we start, what this is about is not us standing at a podium and saying, look how much we know. This is about combined, Mike's 20 years, I'm going on year 25. The only difference is I started when I was 5, Tony, is that you're getting, 40 plus years of our screw ups, right? And we've learned what works, what doesn't work, why you can't program certain ways, why you can't, go about things a certain way. So that's really the biggest part. Is we try to say, look, we're going to give you a head start, so you don't have to go through the next 20 years screwing it up. We'll show you how we did it, so you don't have to.
Yeah. We're coming up on 2023. Which means we're roughly 2 or 3 weeks away, if not sooner, of various editors of online sites or publications asking professionals like us, hey, what are the new trends coming up? What are these new innovative trends are going to be in 2023 that we got to keep our eyes on? And I never really like engaged, because I just want to say barbells still work, dumbbells still work. Like, they're not, I mean, it's a bit old school meathead strength coach thing to say, but it's pretty true. Like, I don't go into this idea of like, oh, we got to use like all this advanced tech and look at bar speed with this mechanism that's, my eyes work. I think this is not to say that stuff doesn't work and doesn't have any validity in what we do, but yeah, I think keeping it simple and like just listening to people and being a better communicator, those 3 things alone are gonna put you above many other people in this industry.
Well, you know what? Oh, go ahead, Eric.
Go ahead, Mike.
I was going to say, one of the things, and I'm a little old school too, I'm definitely turning into the strength coach says, like, get off my lawn type guy. But you mentioned, like the basics work. And, I think one of the trends that I'm seeing and especially with social media is you see all these newer coaches with all this technology, right? And there's nothing wrong with technology, but in my opinion, if you haven't spent that time coaching the basics over and over and over again and teaching hundreds of people how to deadlift, bench, squat, do pull-ups, right? All of that information from the tech, it's good, but it's not as good as it could be because you just don't have that true in the trenches training experience. And that can't be bought via technology, right? You can't, I love using the term wisdom. And I'm sure we all have spent time with someone that's older, right? Someone that's in their 70s and their 80s. And when you have that conversation with them, there's this wisdom, right? There's this gentle wisdom where they explain to you what they've done. And you can't gain that true wisdom through technology, right? You just need to put the time in. And I think that's something that people really need to understand. There's nothing wrong with velocity-based training and heart rate variability and all that stuff.
No, not at all.
But you need, in my opinion, you need to have that really, really good base level of just coaching and training and really being simple, because we've all done it. If you do things really, really simple, and I've done it, man, I've chased the trends that come out, and then I go, oh man, that trend that I spent this money on this course, you know what, cool, it was information, but I used 1% of what I learned. So I think there's something to be said about just years of trial and error and understanding how to make decisions without, looking at your watch or your smartphone every second, because there's going to be days and times where you're just going to have to train and prepare. And, if you looked at your watch and your iPhone every day and you go, well, my iPhone says, based off of my last week, I can't train. It's just like, well, I understand that. But in the real world, like I always tell my fighters, right? If I got a guy fighting in the UFC and he's a main event guy on a Saturday night and his HRV's low, what is he going to call Dana White and go, hey, Dana, listen, I had a low HRV score, so I can't fight this evening, right? You can't do that. Yeah. So at a certain point, you have to use a little bit of common sense, but you have to just just roll with it sometimes, and you can't make every single decision on technology.
I couldn't agree more. And again, this is not to say that this is not an anti-technology podcast, because we've all used some degree of technology, whether it's HRV, using our Apple Watch. But I have to say, as a coach, and granted, I'm not working with a wide variety of high level athletes right now. Like, I have a few high school, college kids I work with, but nowhere near the level of athlete that I worked with when I was at Cressey Sports Performance. Like, I work with Gen Pop clients now. So really, there's no need for me to hook up a barbell to to find out what their bar speed is when then they just have to go to work the next day. However, with that clientele, the power of hands-on coaching trumps technology 10, 20, 50 fold. No client of mine that I have currently has really said, yeah, Tony, I'm going to stick with you because you're using barbells based training with, and I'm blanking on the names of the technology that measures bar speed. I know I'm just blanking out. I know there's like 3 or 4 of them that are very popular. I've retained my clients because when I watch them doing a lift, whether it's a squat, a chest supported row, a deadlift, I'm watching and I'm giving them feedback after a set that I feel they need to work on, or I'm putting my hands on them and putting them into a better position so they actually feel where they're supposed to feel the exercise. And then like, oh my God, and I never felt that before. That to me is the power of coaching. And to me, that's a more powerful tool as a coach than any technology I could be using with them.
Hey, everybody, a quick break in the action here. Hope you're enjoying the show and we appreciate you listening. We're working hard to bring you the highest quality content and best guests every single week. So if you could do us a big favor and go and like and subscribe to the show on whatever platform you get your podcasts on, it would be greatly appreciated. Be sure to listen at the end of the show also to find out where you can find out more information about our courses, as well as a special discount code for all our listeners. Thanks again, and let's get back to the show. Yeah, the tech, and again, it's not anti-tech. What it does help we find it helpful for is it helps, and sometimes even in the gamification of training, so to speak. We had Rhett Larson on a couple of weeks ago, and hey, maybe just them seeing that output of the bar speed is more for some feedback to, hey, you get, this is measuring more your input into this exercise. It's not because I'm looking to hit any specific number, just I want you to be able to gauge your effort level. And so it's helpful there. But I think on the broader scope, taking a step back in the bird's eye view, I think the big thing we need to understand is we're not really inventing anything. And I forget what a legendary strength coach said. He's like, tell me what you're doing now, and I'll tell you what we called it 30 years ago. And I joke when we teach, I said, do we have any, yogis that are 2,000 years or older? No hands go up. Do we have any ancient Greeks in the room? No hands go up. Okay, well then none of us invented shit, because they were using medicine balls in ancient Greece, and most of the stuff that we call mobility flows and all that stuff, it's yoga just repackaged. So so with that, we're not really inventing things. We're just figuring better ways to deliver it, which is just good coaching. But let's talk about the fact that you did transition from more athletes to, general population. And how does that change your approach in terms of your programming, in terms of how you go about things?
Yeah, so I did that transition mostly because of where my studio is here in Boston. It's in Brookline. And I knew going in that I wasn't going to be training a lot of athletes. And honestly, I needed to change the pace as a coach. So when I left Cressey Sports Performance, I was working with baseball players for many, 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 many years, amongst other athletes too in other sports. But I needed a bit more variety in my coaching life. And I've always enjoyed working with regular people, Gen Pop. That's what I started with early in my career. Then there was like a 8-year block at Cressey Sports Performance where I got to work with MLB guys and fighters, some not to the degree of Mike, but football players, and a wide array of athletes. And with regards to my approach to coaching them, writing programs for Gen Pop, I get asked this question quite often. And honestly, if you look at a program that I wrote for a 20-year-old pitcher from Georgia Tech from back in 2014 to a program that I write for Hank from sales, who just wants to get a little bit stronger and lose a little fat. There's not a massive difference. I mean, they're both deadlifting, they're both doing single leg work, they're both doing pull-ups, they're both doing farmer carries. I would say the difference is load. Certainly if I'm prepping someone for a competitive season or for an event, I mean, there's going to be a degree of periodization and prepping them for that season that Hank is not going to receive. And also velocity of, going into this whole conversation about bar speed. I'm not too concerned about them maintaining a certain level of velocity with their force output, rate of force development, anything like that with a Gen Pop client. And even with programming, a lot of my Gen Pop clients, they don't need periodization. Like, I'm not writing, 1 month, 2 month, 3 month blocks of periodization for my Gen Pop clients, because life gets in the way. I mean, they're going to get sick. They're going to have kids get sick. Work's going to suck. They're going to miss that. They're going to travel. They have family. So really, I mean, yes, I do think of like my programming as 1 month blocks, because just from a billing standpoint, that's what I do with my clients. Each month, they pay me up front for their sessions. I write their program for them. They don't get a new program until those sessions are done, and then we just keep the system going. So, and even with that programming, it's not, I'm not thinking that far ahead. I mean, there's oftentimes people come in and I can tell when they walk in that they're not feeling it that day, or, they're just stressed to the gills about whatever. And I just say, hey, I'm going to whiteboard you today. And what I mean by that is I'm going to write on my whiteboard, here's what we have planned today. Yeah, you're supposed to do 3 sets of 5 of this exercise, and maybe you hit a heavy triple on this. And so today this is what we're doing instead. And again, that just comes down to coaching and feel and treating people, understanding that they're not always going to be coming in feeling like rock stars. And sometimes they're just going to have a bad day, and they need to move and they need to do something. I've always tried to instill in my clients that showing up is the key. The hardest part is just showing up, but we can always find a training effect. So even if we aren't hitting previous week's numbers or hitting PRs that you were hitting the month prior, that's fine. It's all ebbs and flows anyways. Like if it were just linear progress, we'd all be superstars and getting paid a lot of money to lift weights and play sports. It's just not, there's going to be peaks and valleys with our strength levels. Throwing a med ball to a wall, that's pretty badass of them. I mean, my clients, they love when I can add chains to their deadlift, and like, oh my God, this is so badass. This is awesome. And it's like, yes, there's a mythology there. Like we're leaning into the strength curve, and there is a method to me implementing chains into someone's deadlifts. But for them, it's just something badass that they can do. So just a tad different. So that, I mean, hopefully I answered your question there, Eric. I know I was kind of going off on a few rants there, but the short answer is, I'm like you guys, I'm very much a fan of training movements and movement patterns. Whether I'm working with an athlete or whether I'm working with a Gen Pop, then I kind of have to look at, if I'm working with an athlete, what's the demands of their sport? What do they need more of? I'm not trying to emulate the sport in the weight room. If anything, I'm trying to do opposite stuff of what they do on the field or on the court or on the mat. And with my Gen Pop, I'm just trying to see, what positions are they kind of stuck in all day? They're kind of sitting in front of a computer, they're hunched over. So I want to open them up a little bit in their session and try to work more posterior chain, more upper back and glutes and hamstrings. So that's kind of like my general approach to it.
Yeah. So, it's interesting because, you've worked with a bunch of professional athletes. Eric worked with the Giants. I've been fortunate enough to work with a bunch of pros up this way. And it's awesome to work with the pros. Right. And I remember you posted something on Instagram, Tony, and I messaged you, and it was about working with, athletes and then Gen Pop. And, I always tell people, when you work with professional athletes, it's great for the resume, but when you work with Gen Pop,
yes.
it's great for the bank. It's great for the bank account, right? Because at the end of the day, right? I mean, pro athletes come and go, and they all want a deal, and there's really not a lot of money in it. Yet some people do really well with it, but you know, from a sustainability standpoint and having that monthly revenue come in, Gen Pop is where it's at, and a lot of people think, oh, you know, you should be working with pros still, and it's like yeah, it's fun and everything, but at the same time, it's sometimes you're just dealing with a bigger pain in the asses, man.
Stress. It's a whole level of stress because, like, you know, even if you're training with athletes, or even if you're training actors, fashion models, like I have one of my best friends in London. I mean, he works with nothing but like actors and models. And yeah, it's cool. Like he's met a lot of famous people. He gets to work with a lot of famous people, but you're kind of at the mercy of their schedule, and it sucks. Like,
yeah,
it's like someone cancels because of whatever reason, and that fucks up the rest of the day. And it's a whole level of stress that, I mean, he's a single guy. He doesn't have any kids. He's not married. No, he can do it and get away. Me, there's no way in hell I could do that. Like I just couldn't do it. Like I worked with an actress a few summers ago who was here filming a movie for Boston, and I am an adamant movie fan. Like that, if I weren't, I often say if I weren't a coach, I'd be reviewing movies and just watching like 4 movies a day, and I'd be completely fine. I would still be jacked, but I'd be watching like a lot of movies. And
priorities.
So when I got to work with her, it was great. Like, I mean, I was super pumped. I knew who she was, and I watched most of her movies, and we would have that. We would talk about that, but the cool thing was that she was there to work. Like that, the gym time was her time off of the set. Like she wanted to just have someone tell her what to do. She was game for anything I wanted to have her do, which was awesome. But to do that to have that lifestyle with 8, 9, 10 of those people, that's a whole level of stress that I wouldn't want. And that's the dark side of the industry that people don't think about. They just think, oh, I get to toss up on Instagram that I worked with so-and-so. And no, they're like, I mean, I've spoken with Ben Bruno. I'm good friends with Ben Bruno. I'm good friends with all these people, like my buddy Luke in London. Like they are stressed at times when it comes to that demographic of working with. So with Gen Pop, it's like, you know, it's pretty smooth sailing. I love it. Like it's like they show up on a weekly basis. Like I don't really have to prep them for anything. It's just like I just want to make sure I don't get them hurt, and that they're just making small, tangible jumps in progress. And yeah, I think your analogy of the training athletes and actors is the resume, but the bank account with Gen Pop it's a perfect analogy. It's spot on.
What I would add to the stress too is when we talk about the competency component. I remember working with a player once, and I remember I don't know what made it hit me, but I was like doing some manual like mobility work with their shoulder. And it hit me like, holy this arm in my hand is worth $20 million a year. Yeah, don't screw this up, right? If I do that with my regular client, like Neil's shoulder is going to be a little sore at the office tomorrow, right? But if I screw up this arm that's in my hand, like I'm going to be on the front page of the paper, right? So like that's a whole nother level of stress. You really got to be good.
Yeah. So let's switch gears a little bit. So, you know, as trainers, regardless of where we go, if people know that we're trainers, people always ask, hey, what's a good workout for this? Or can you give me a workout for that? And unfortunately, you know, if you're a good coach and you know this, you can't just hand someone a workout, you know, without knowing a damn thing about them. But what is your process when it comes to delivering a workout or developing a workout or a training program for someone?
So I think, yes, I agree. Like, I can't tell you how many times like random people on the internet will send me a message like, hey, my knee hurts. Can you write me a program? I'm like, I don't know you. Like, like what are we doing here? But with my clients, like there is I hate using the word assessment, but that's really the term to use. Like, I know there's like these in vogue terms that people use now, like a like mind session or like a success session. Like those are fine, but it's an assessment. And I need some general information of someone's movement ability and capabilities. You know, what movements hurt or exacerbate their symptoms. If they're coming to me with low back pain or a shoulder that doesn't feel great or a knee, whatever, I need to know what stuff in their day-to-day life bothers that, or where it feels worse or where it doesn't. I need to know their past injury history to see I mean, I've had people forget to tell me they've had heart surgery. I'm like, we'll be like 2 sessions in. Oh yeah, I forgot to tell you. Back in 4 years ago, I had heart surgery. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. Like that would have been. I need that information. And so when I go through an initial assessment with my clients, like I try not to peel back the onion too much. So it's actually very rare that somebody is coming in with like this laundry list of injuries. Like it happens, of course, like we get it a lot. And if that is the case, I'm going to be a lot more detailed with my approach and get into the nitty gritty and really kind of spend the full hour basically just talking about that stuff and trying to see, okay, what is exacerbating their symptoms. For the most part, if someone's coming in with a pretty clean injury history, yeah, they might say, oh, I've had my lower back kind of hurts me sometimes, or my knee kind of tweaks me out sometimes. Like I just want to get some general sense of, their movement ability. So I'm putting them on the table for like 5 minutes, and I'm just doing some rudimentary movement screens of like just looking at their hip flexion, looking at their adductor length, maybe have them do an active straight leg raise. And then I'm looking at overhead mobility just to kind of give me 2 like global movement patterns that are going to give me a basic idea of their movement ability. Then honestly, after that takes maximum 5, maybe 10 minutes. We're doing a training session. And I mean, it sounds very cliche, I get it, but I do get more information watching them do stuff, like, and not over coaching them, at least in the beginning. So if I set up a trap bar and I put the plates on, I load it to a load that I know they're going to be able to do. And I just say, pick that up 5 times. That's all I say. And I just want to see like what their default mechanism is or movement pattern is to pick that barbell up. And then from there, I say, oh, okay, well, they're not in a good position. So let's coach them up and let's get them in a better position. Then from there, it's like, oh, well, how confident are you with your push-ups? You mentioned to me your shoulders are bothering you. Let's look at your push-up. I'm trying to see like, are they getting good scapular movement on the rib cage when they're doing a push-up, or is their lumbar spine caving in and they're not getting good pelvic stability, hip pelvic stability. So it's stuff like that gives me really all the information I need to develop or conjure up, not conjure up, but produce a good program from them moving forward. Looking at body weight squats. I mean, I honestly, body weight squat, for most people, their body weight squat is atrocious. So I load them up and I say, here's a plate, here's a goblet, let's see you squat with that. Not a lot of weight. I'm not doing barbell back squats on day 1. Don't interpret it that way. But most people's body weight squat doesn't feel good. And I'm kind of tinkering with foot position, stance, staggerness. I'm trying to see like what feels best for that individual, because everyone's anatomy is a little bit different. And I'm trying to see, and then I load them up a little bit, have them hold a light kettlebell, a light dumbbell. And that load gets them to turn their abs on and their core on, gets them a little bit more posterior tilt in their pelvis. Oh my God, now you're squatting a little bit deeper. It's like, yeah, because you're engaged, you're turning stuff on. So, I'm not scared to load people on session number 1. I mean, I'm not testing 1 rep maxes or anything. I don't need to, but giving them a little bit of a flavor of what a training session is going to feel like without crushing them. I want them feeling like they could do more at the end of a session. I want them feeling good at the end of a session. To me, that's going to be a more powerful selling point for me as the coach, that they're leaving a session feeling pretty good, like, oh yeah, that wasn't so bad. And then, the likelihood they're going to come back is going to be pretty high. So that's kind of like my general approach to assessment. And then that's going to give me the information I need to write a coherent program based off their injury history, their goals, their anatomy, moving forward.
It's interesting because this reminds me of, being a kettlebell guy. I've, studied under Pavel and Brett Jones, and, I've taught, I can't tell you how many people I've taught how to do a kettlebell swing. And early on, I used to take people through this very sort of methodical approach to swinging a kettlebell, and it worked. But now what I do is I warm them up and I say, you know what a kettlebell swing looks like, right? And they're like, yeah, well, just show me your swings. And I have saved so much time by just allowing them to show me what they've got early in the session, because, yes, it seems cool to like be able to, oh, you blinked when, you know, you were on the eccentric part and your neck was slightly turned this way. That's, you know, I think people want to, you know, pick apart certain things, but, you know, I always love to give my clients the opportunity to prove me right, to show me that they know what they're doing. And if I have to give them, you know, one or two little tweaks based off of what I'm seeing, great, because man, I probably saved myself 45 minutes. And there's nothing wrong with saying to your client, hey, that looks awesome. Because I think a lot of people and a lot of coaches want to talk the talk. They want to talk about, you know, parts, and they want to talk about muscles, and this isn't firing, it's probably this. But, you know, it's, if your client moves well and they can do it well, give them a high five, give them some positive reinforcement, and then move on. Because if it isn't broke, don't fix it. But you need to get some sort of baseline, and what you're doing is essentially you're movement screening with a very light load, and that's really what it boils down to. But you know, I want to talk about the idea of a trainable menu, because you know, I went back and read one of your blogs on that, and I know a lot of that came from talking with Mike Robertson. But explain to us, you know, give us sort of the cliff notes of the trainable menu.
So the trainable menu is yeah, you're right. I got it listening to a podcast from Mike Robertson with Chris Chase. So Chris Chase then was, I believe, the coach of I think USC baseball, or maybe he was in the NBA. He was training high level athletes nonetheless. And he mentioned this idea of the trainable menu, where, you know, athletes would come in and during a competitive season, they get pretty banged up and they don't feel 100%. His job as a strength coach was to find their trainable menu, focusing on what they can do and not what they can't do. And to me, that was a punch in the face. I was like, whoa, that is like next level, like mindset, philosophy shit that I never even thought of. I mean, I kind of like intuitively kind of lean that way, but I never had a way of articulating it in a way that made sense, the trainable menu. So in the years since, I've kind of helped popularize that concept, where my MO as the coach is to find people's trainable menus. So yeah, maybe their low back doesn't feel great, or their shoulder doesn't feel great, or maybe their arm is in a sling. It's like, hey, you have a lower body you can train, you have a right arm you can train, you have some glutes you can train. We're going to find your trainable menu. And I had to put myself through it not too long ago during COVID. You know, I ruptured my right Achilles down in Florida when we were down at my in-laws' house, and I had to fly back up to Boston and get surgery. And I really took it upon myself in my social media to showcase, like, hey, I'm in a cast and a boot on crutches. I can't even put weight on my right leg, but I'm still doing rack pulls. I'm still doing single leg work on I joke that my left leg turned into I was doing half field split squats, or half field squats with a safety squat bar on my left leg, like upwards of like 350 pounds. It was like, but I knew that once I did start rehab, that neural input to my injured side was going to expedite my rehab. Probably. You know, there's a lot of research that suggests, like, even if you don't train an injured limb, training the other side, there is like a feed forward neural stimulation to the injured side. So when you actually do start rehab, that process is kind of expedited. So, you know, that's what I mean by the trainable menu, and something I try to instill with all of my clients. Say, listen, I understand that your shoulder doesn't feel great this week or today or whatever, but there's a lot of other things we can do in a training session that's going to get your heart rate up, that's going to feel you feeling good, it's going to stimulate muscle growth. You know, that's going to bode well, even if we aren't training that part of your body.
You know, I really love that, and the way you're delivering that, and it kind of brings me back. You know, most people know Mike and I through the FMS channels and being lead instructors for them for 15 years. And you know, some of the biggest misconceptions and things I wish I could just get people to understand is, you know, people will argue about the tests themselves. Oh, why do you squat with your feet straight? Or why do you do this? And that test doesn't do this. And it's like, you don't get it. Like if Tony has his movement screen, we have this movement screen. I like this one because it's simple and succinct and it worked for me. But as long as you're doing something, the point of this whole thing is to figure out what you can and what you shouldn't do. And really the whole point of this, like even the point, oh, well, it doesn't prevent injuries or predict injuries. No, we never said it did. all we're doing is prevent me from hurting you. Like if I could teach the course, and Gray and Lee wouldn't be real thrilled about it, but like, because I have to deliver the system when we teach the workshop. But if I could just stand up there and say, look, the whole purpose of this thing is to stop you from doing dumb shit. Don't do anything stupid, right? This guy can't even touch his toes. Probably not a good idea to run to the bar and start deadlifting from the floor. That's all it is, and that's basically that concept that you're saying is trainable menu. That's essentially what we want to land on, is say these are the things that we're all good to go with. And even if you do a movement screen and you completely bomb 3 of the tests and have pain in 2 of them, I still got 4 other patterns I could train the hell out of. So I think that's the misconception, and you shoot all the arrows you want at the brand and the screen, but you're not understanding the concept and the purpose behind it. And so in going back to what you're talking about with working with general population, is that you do need to consider, especially now, coming out of COVID, is that you have a lot of people that are very fragile, that you have people that you have to consider some stuff before you just go and give them the template program.
Yeah. Yeah, spot on. I mean, I think to me, it might come across as being a bit of a curmudgeon in saying this, but rest is really not an option. I mean, there's certainly some extenuating circumstances where, yes, like a lot of times, like, I remember I had a client who had knee surgery, and he was like, what can I do the following day? And I'm like, dude, relax, like give your body a little bit of a break and allow it to recover. But again, this idea of like, oh, I got to take 2 weeks off because I can't, this part of my body doesn't feel great. Like, I'm like, I'll push back against that to some degree. Certainly I don't want to disrespect anyone's preferences or maybe their doctor's advice or anything like that. I'm just a dumb strength coach. But I've proven many times to people that, hey, you can still get a really good training session in and follow a really good program, even though a certain part of your body is kind of out of commission at the moment. So I just think that's a powerful tool for any coach or fitness professional to keep. And it's a really great message to, yes, athletes, but certainly Gen Pop clients too. Because I mean, to me, that consistency is what I'm after. Because what I hate happening is when people are making progress and they're making good strides, and then something happens where something happened at home where they kind of hurt their shoulder. Oh, I'm going to take 2 weeks off. And then it's just like they're losing a lot of momentum there. And I was like, I really want to avoid that as much as possible.
So our time here has been flying by, and I don't want to miss out talking about some of the stuff you're working on. So you have, I know you have this strategic strength workshop that you're coming out in the near future. Tell us about that, as well as some other stuff you're working on.
Yeah, so the strategic strength workshop is a workshop I do with my friend that I referenced earlier in London, Luke Worthington. So he like us has 20 plus years of experience over in the UK working with a lot of high level athletes over there. He currently works with a lot of A-list celebrities. But he and I have been doing this workshop for probably since 2018. We've done it a few times in London. We've done it a few times over here in Boston. And we recorded it a couple weeks ago in Los Angeles. So we're currently in video review, which I don't know about you guys, but I hate watching myself on video for 7 hours. It's awful. And so like every little thing, I was like, oh, I said that wrong, or I could have said that better. And I'm like, but that product was, it's going to, and I think it ended up being 11 or 12 hours of he and I discussing our approach to assessment, our approach to getting people in better positions as far as like breathing patterns, not too deep down the rabbit hole. I don't want to scare people off and saying we're going to go full PRI, Posture Restoration Institute. There's elements of it, but it's really about getting people into better positions, and that a lot of what is perceived as a dysfunction is not really a dysfunction. It's just like we need to get them in a better position. And talking about program design and coaching up people on their squats and deadlifts and some of my tenets to those movements. And what I mean by tenets is like across the board, when I'm coaching up a squat or coaching up a deadlift, here's some rules or principles that I use with clients across the board that I think apply to everyone, and then I'll leave it up to the internet to argue about bar position and where our hands go and is sumo deadlift cheating. I'll leave that up to the internet to argue. But that's going to be I think that's going to be released early 2023. We're aiming for January. And then my wife and I are going to be releasing an app together through a company called Suitor. It's going to be called Strong Body, Strong Mind. So my side of the app is going to be strength and conditioning. I'm probably going to start with a program called Beginner to Badass. So basically starting somebody from a stark beginner, I'm going to build them up into a badass over the course of 6, 8, 12 months. And then her side as a psychologist is going to be dealing more with the mindset component of that. So talking about motivation and barriers to motivation. So I think that's going to be pretty powerful, or a nice tool for people to have to follow a coherent program, but also getting the expertise and knowledge of an actual doctor of psychology and not some just random mindset coach on Instagram. So that's going to be, I think that is going to be pretty cool. So those are 2 big products coming out soon.
Awesome. Good for you. And we're going to have links in the show notes for all this stuff. Before we start to wrap it up, Michael, anything you want to add or any last thoughts?
No, Tony, it's always good to catch up, man. It's been a while since I've seen you in person, and hopefully we get to cross paths at some point. If you're ever out
that far apart
this way, you're more than welcome to come in.
Yeah, absolutely. Likewise, Mike.
Cool. Well, I want to thank you for your time, Tony. We want to thank everybody for listening. And this has been the Principles of Performance podcast. Thank you for listening to the Principles of Performance podcast. If you've enjoyed our content, please like and share on your social media outlets, as well as subscribe and give us a review on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, or whatever your preferred platform is to listen to. For more information on the Principles of Program Design courses and workshops, visit us at www.principlesofprogramdesign.com and follow us on all of the social media channels where we post new content every day. To save 10% on any PPD courses, enter the discount code PRINCIPLESPODCAST10 at checkout. If you have any questions we can answer or suggestions for the show, you can email us at info@principlesofprogramdesign.com or message us on social media. Thank you again for your support.